In a quiet town, surrounded by narrow streets and old brick buildings, there lived a person who mostly stayed in the background. They had a gentle presence, the kind people hardly noticed unless they spoke. Day after day, life moved in the same slow rhythm. They walked past the same streets, drank the same coffee, and returned to the same small apartment. Life was simple, safe, and predictable, but inside, something was different. A small spark flickered in their chest, a quiet curiosity that refused to be ignored. It woke them in the middle of the night, making their thoughts wander far beyond the walls of their apartment. They didn't know exactly what it meant, only that something was calling them to do more, to reach for something bigger than themselves. One afternoon, while walking home, they noticed a small building they had never entered. The sign was faded, the door slightly open, and the smell of polished wood and dust drifted out. Something pulled at them. Hesitant, they pushed it open. Inside, the space was large and warm, filled with the soft golden light of the afternoon sun. Dust floated like tiny stars in the air, and there it was, a piano. Old, elegant, slightly worn at the edges, but unmistakably beautiful. It sat in the center of the room, almost waiting to be noticed. Their hearts skipped. They had always loved music, but had never played an instrument. The piano seemed alive, the air around it electric. The smooth wood, the black and white keys, the quiet power it seemed to hold. It was overwhelming. They felt drawn to it, but fear wrapped around them like a heavy blanket. Then they heard the words echo in their mind. The warnings from a lifetime of doubt. You're not ready. You'll fail. Don't touch it. They shook their head, trying to push the thoughts away. But the piano was calling them in a way nothing else ever had. Quiet, patient, insistent. They took careful steps closer. The room felt enormous now, the ceiling towering, walls lined with empty shelves and shadows. The piano gleamed under sunlight, reflecting their nervous excitement. Every instinct screamed caution. Yet, curiosity tugged at their hands like a gentle wind. For days afterward, they thought of the piano constantly. Every quiet moment, every walk through the streets, their mind returned to that room. They imagined sitting, pressing a key, feeling a sound emerge. Thrilling, terrifying. Late one night, sleep came slowly. Their dreams were filled with the piano. In one dream, they sat at it, fingers hovering, hesitant but longing. A soft note escaped, trembling and pure. It echoed through the dream, and with it came warmth. A sense that something extraordinary could happen if they dared. Morning arrived with a quiet intensity. The air felt cooler, sharper, as if the world itself had shifted overnight. They thought about the piano constantly, the small spark of courage growing brighter each hour. Finally, unable to resist any longer, they returned. The walk to the building was slow, each step deliberate. Their hands trembled slightly, not from cold, but anticipation. The door creaked as they entered, sunlight streaming through the windows. And there it was again, the piano, waiting. Its surface gleamed in the golden light. Silent, but somehow speaking directly to them. They approached, each step heavier than the last. Their chest ached with fear and longing. What if they failed? What if a note shattered the moment, but deep down, a voice whispered, "What if it's beautiful?" They knelt, studying the keys. Smooth, polished, inviting. They felt their heartbeat echo in the quiet room. Cold sweat pricked the back of their neck. This was a moment they had imagined for years, but never dared approach. Fear was real, sharp, almost paralyzing. And yet, something strange happened. Their hands twitched, fingers brushing the edge of the keys, and a spark of courage flowed through them. It wasn't grand bravery, just the quiet decision to try. That alone made the room feel lighter, as if the piano leaned closer, welcoming them. For hours, they sat, fingertips hovering, studying the instrument. They traced the black and white keys with their eyes, imagining patterns and sounds, feeling the weight of possibility. Every second stretched, filled with suspense. Quiet tension making the room almost vibrate. Outside, the sun began to lower, casting long shadows across the polished floor. Dust floated lazily, catching the last rays. They closed their eyes, took a deep breath, and felt their hand move slightly closer. The first real touch was gentle, almost reverent. A fingertip brushed a key. A tiny sound emerged. Not loud, not perfect, but pure. It resonated softly. Their eyes widened. Their breath caught. The piano seemed to respond, acknowledging the courage it had taken to reach out. They pressed another key. Notes blended, shy at first, then stronger. Exhilaration mixed with fear. The piano wasn't just wood and strings. It was alive, speaking through them. Minutes passed. Each note carried more than sound. It carried emotion, intention, a glimpse of their potential. Hesitant at first, their hands grew confident. Each chord echoed in their chest, filling them with warmth, awe, and accomplishment. They stopped, leaning back, listening. Silence was heavy but comforting. They had done it, touched the piano, and the experience felt monumental. A tiny note had unlocked something inside, a reminder of what courage could do. For hours, they experimented, exploring patterns, imagining stories, emotions forming in shapes only they could feel. Every key, every vibration, was a lesson in patience, curiosity, and bravery. The room grew dim as the sun set. Golden light faded, replaced by a soft evening glow. They felt a mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration. Something inside shifted. The piano was more than an instrument. It was a doorway to a world they had never entered before. When they stood to leave, their legs felt unsteady, not from tiredness, but the weight of discovery. Their mind raced. Could they really play? Could they create something meaningful? They paused at the doorway, looking back. The piano gleamed faintly, patient. They understood this was only the beginning. They had crossed the first threshold, the first moment of courage. Walking home, the world seemed different. Every sound, shadow, faint echo of music felt alive. Courage wasn't the absence of fear, it was acting despite it. Over the next days, the piano returned to their thoughts. They imagined melodies, felt patterns in the keys, dreamed of the music they could create. Fear lingered, but excitement grew. What had held them back was not lack of skill, but lack of belief. One evening, they returned. Moonlight streamed through a high window, casting silver shadows. Hands shaking, heart racing, they approached slowly. Every step significant, every breath full of anticipation. For hours, they experimented, moving from one note to two to a chord, slowly building courage with each sound. The music didn't have to be perfect, it just had to exist. In that existence, it was already magic. They realized the piano didn't respond to skill alone. It responded to emotion, intention, bravery. Every act of courage opened a door. Fear remained, but no longer a wall. Night fell. Exhausted but fulfilled, they discovered something new about themselves, a spark of creativity, a well of courage, and the reminder that even the smallest action could change everything. Walking home under the stars, the quiet thrill of potential filled them. Life felt bigger. Possibilities existed where none had before. The piano was more than an instrument. It was a teacher, mirror, and challenge. Lying in bed, they could still feel the echo of keys. The sound, warmth, and thrill of creation stayed with them. The journey was just beginning. Tomorrow and the day after held promise of discovery, growth, and wonder. Somewhere in the quiet room, the piano waited, patient, silent, alive, waiting for the next touch, the next act of courage, the next person willing to reach, trust, and create. It was a small beginning, a simple note, but it carried the weight of everything to follow. Courage had transformed an ordinary day into something extraordinary. The protagonist knew, deep inside, they would return, not as someone afraid, but ready to discover the magic within themselves. The quiet city slept, unaware, but inside that room, something had changed forever. The story was far from over. The next morning, the city seemed quieter than usual. The sun filtered through the narrow streets, painting everything in gold. Inside a small apartment, the person who had touched the piano the day before was already awake, heart racing, mind alive with thoughts of music. Sleep had not brought rest. Instead, it had brought melodies, small, fragile tunes, demanding attention. They dressed quickly, put on a light coat, and walked slowly toward the building where the piano waited. Each step felt weighty with anticipation. Yesterday had been the first touch, a beginning, but today was different. They wanted more. They wanted to understand the magic hidden in the black and white keys, to see what they could create if they dared to trust themselves. The moment they stepped inside, the familiar warmth of sunlight and dust greeted them. The piano stood in the center of the room, as if it had known they would return. Its wood gleamed softly, polished but patient, and the silence around it felt alive. They approached carefully, hands trembling slightly, not from fear, but from expectation. What if the notes they played were wrong? Deep down, a small voice whispered, "You can do this. You already have." Sitting on the worn bench, they let their fingers hover above the keys. They remembered the first touch, that hesitant fingertip, producing a sound so pure and fragile, it had startled them. That small note had awakened something inside, a feeling of possibility, of life opening up. This time they allowed themselves to play freely. The first notes were quiet, uncertain, but they blended into a short, trembling melody. Rough, imperfect, yet full of emotion. Each key press seemed to connect them to something larger than themselves. The sunlight, the air in the room, the distant sounds of the city, as they played. Nervous tension lifted. Their hands moved more confidently, exploring the keys, discovering patterns and rhythms they hadn't imagined. Every mistake became a lesson. Every note, right or wrong, carried meaning. Slowly, the music began to flow. Hours passed like minutes. They did not notice the fading sunlight or growing shadows. Every sound resonated, not just in the room but inside themselves. The piano absorbed their hesitation and returned it as something beautiful. They laughed softly to themselves, just a person and a piano, creating something larger than life. At one point, they paused, hands resting lightly on the keys. Silence felt overwhelming yet comforting. The piano had taught them something important. The beauty of creation does not rely on perfection. It relies on courage, attention, and the willingness to try again and again. Days turned into weeks. Each morning they returned to the piano, exploring melodies, experimenting with rhythm and tempo. They began writing music in small notebooks, sketching ideas that emerged while playing. The quiet apartment that once felt empty now seemed full of possibility. Life, they realized, was like the piano, full of potential waiting to be discovered. Music changed more than their hands. Each chord became a small triumph over fear. They realized talent was less about skill and more about persistence, curiosity, and courage. The piano had become a mirror, reflecting their growth, their ability to take small steps toward something greater. One evening, while playing a gentle melody, they heard footsteps. A small child peeked through the doorway, eyes wide with curiosity. The person smiled and gestured for them to come in. Hesitantly, the child stepped inside, mesmerized by the piano. "You play it?" the child asked. "Yes," they replied softly. "Do you want to try?" The child nodded. Guided by the person, their small hands touched the keys. At first, the notes were hesitant, clumsy, but slowly, the melody emerged, simple yet beautiful. Watching the child, they felt a thrill they hadn't anticipated. The joy of sharing something once a secret treasure, The child laughed at wrong notes and tried again. Each mistake was met with patience. Gradually, the melody grew. Together, their music formed something unexpectedly lovely. The piano responded differently now, richer, fuller, almost as if it knew the music had become a bridge, not just between keys, but between hearts. Word spread. People came, curious about the quiet melodies drifting through the streets. Some had never played an instrument. Some had lost confidence long ago. Under the patient guidance of the person in the piano, they discovered courage to touch the keys. It became a quiet ritual. Morning light, piano, gentle fingers. Each day, new melodies, new stories, new emotions emerged. Songs were joyous, mournful, playful. Each carried the essence of those who touched the instrument, their fears, hopes, dreams. The person watched, feeling deep satisfaction. The piano had become a living testament to courage, creativity, and connection. Yet the person did not stop learning. They experimented with composition, stringing chords and melodies in new ways. Each day brought surprises, unexpected harmonies, rhythms that felt alive, textures that made their hearts swell. Sometimes they closed their eyes, letting the music guide them, allowing the piano to speak rather than trying to control it. One late evening, exhausted but exhilarated, they played a piece unlike anything before, quiet at first, hesitant, then growing, swelling with emotion. Each note captured everything they had learned: fear, courage, patience, joy, and endless possibilities. Tears filled their eyes, not from sadness, but from awe. They had become more than a timid observer. They had become a creator, a storyteller, someone capable of touching the world in meaningful ways. The music drifted beyond the room, through the streets, touching listeners. Some stopped, enchanted. Some felt memories awaken, emotions long buried. And they realized music was not just sound, it was connection, it was hope, a way to speak when words failed, to touch lives without seeing them. Months passed. The piano became a hub of quiet miracles. People who once feared failure found courage. Children discovered joy. Adults rediscovered hope. And the person, once hidden, found purpose and fulfillment they had never known. The piano transformed not only their world but everyone who touched it. One evening, as the sun set in gold and red, the person sat alone at the piano. Fingers moved with confidence, composing a melody that felt like the culmination of every lesson learned. Dust glimmered in the last light. They finally understood the magic. It had never been in the piano alone. It was in the courage to try, to reach, to believe in themselves and in the possibilities of connection. They closed their eyes, letting the music linger. A small smile curved their lips. A single, hesitant touch had become a story of growth, hope, and transformation. They had faced fear, embraced curiosity, and discovered the extraordinary power of persistence, patience, and passion. And somewhere, in the quiet town, the piano waited, patient, silent, alive, waiting for the next person willing to try, to create. Every note played, every melody discovered, promised something simple, yet profound. Even the smallest act of courage could change a life forever. The person stretched tired muscles, feeling overwhelming gratitude. Music had changed them, shaped them, and allowed them to touch others. As they walked into the cool night, they knew the journey was far from over. There would always be more music to explore, more fear to overcome, more hearts to reach. They understood life itself was like the piano, full of possibilities, full of keys waiting to be pressed, full of stories waiting to be told, and the courage to start, to reach out, to try, is what turns the ordinary into something extraordinary. That night, they lay in bed, still hearing the echoes of the day's music. It was more than sound. It was a feeling, a pulse, a reminder that growth and beauty are born from courage and persistence. Deep inside, they knew every day, every note, every small act of bravery would ripple outward, changing lives in ways they might never fully see, but always feel. The piano waited, the town listened, and the person dreamed. And so, the music continued,